What a week it's been. Just when I was starting to transition back into the club game, wanting to do some videos about La Liga, Premier League, Bundesliga, all hell breaks loose with the story that broke this week that FIFA is trying to sell a stake of the World Cup to a private equity firm here in the U.S. We've seen all the backlash from UEFA, member nations, the media debates. Uh, Personally, I don't want to talk about the pros and cons of this deal if it had gone through, because now Infantino's backtracked, saying that it won't go through. I don't want to talk about whether Infantino should resign or not. There's talks that he might resign. What I just really want to talk about is more what's been getting under my skin this week is the narrative that's been sold in this battle between UEFA and FIFA, which has really been the key storylines. Obviously, there's the frustration, but this has been sold as a case of UEFA versus FIFA. And what's really been getting under my skin is this narrative that UEFA are the good, the traditionalists, and that FIFA are the greedy, uh, the greedy organization. Excuse me, that just only cares about money. What this really is, and the media's not telling you it, is just a classic case of two alpha dogs going head to head and trying to mark their territory. That's what it really is because we all, even though FIFA, excuse me, has been is the governing body, UEFA has really been the top dog all these years because they have the best teams, the best leagues, best players, best national teams. If I'm not mistaken, since 1990, the World Cup is won by UEFA nations apart from three in '94 and 2002 with Brazil and 2022 with Argentina. So they have all the leverage, all the power, as we saw this week, them wanting to boycott the World Cup in a few years. Hilarious. We'll get into that later. But this is just a classic case of power because UEFA's always been the top dog, but FIFA, being the governing body, wants to regain some of that power, which is why they started the Club World Cup and they're trying to creep into the club game, something that UEFA isn't happy about because they want things to stay, they want the status quo to remain how it is, and they don't like the fact that FIFA is starting to favor other nations apart from UEFA. As to a certain degree, there were some speculations going on in this tournament that the decisions from refereeing, from the organizations were going against UEFA nations teams, them benefiting and quite scandalous and quite ridiculously uh, the non UEFA teams, as we saw with the Balogun incident during the World Cup, what we've seen with Argentina throughout the entire tournament, and UEFA is not happy with that. They want to regain that power, that control. But all this stuff that we constantly hear about UEFA being the tradition. Now, excuse me, before I get into that, let me just say I'm not saying that UEFA might not be the lesser of the two evils. I'm a little bit more inclined to UEFA than FIFA, to be honest. But that doesn't mean UEFA is it absolutely cares about the soul of the game because as they are as greedy as FIFA, maybe more strategic, but as greedy. They care more about the money than the game, than the well-being of the game. As we saw, one good example is what happened in 2021 after the Super League happened. We had the same problem where it was a case of traditionalists versus greedy owners, whatever titles they use. Them talking about that they cared about the game, wanting to protect the soul of the game, as they said before. And then what happened a few weeks later? We had the Champions League final between two English teams. It was in the midst of the pandemic. It wasn't as severe as the year before, but still, it was the pandemic. Fans couldn't come back into the game. Couldn't go to the stadium. And what did they do? Um, they host the final in England to respect the fans who both both supporters, so they wouldn't have to travel, have to worry about all the COVID vaccine, all the mandates, all that kind of and all those kind of things. They care about that? No, they moved the final from Turkey because they had to, and they put it in Portugal. And they put it in Portugal because Portugal was least strict with the COVID restrictions, and which was good for their sponsors. So in that case, they didn't care about the well-being of the game and the fans. Eh, for them, it was more about the money than it was about the well-being of the fans. Now, I'm not saying that UEFA shouldn't be going against their sponsors. Obviously, the sponsors pay a lot of money, but please save me the whole you guys care about the game. Excuse me, the well-being of the game. We even saw it a month later at the Euros that it was at that Euro competition where it was held in how goodness knows how many nations. I think it was like 11 nations in total, and you had, and again, this was still in the midst of the pandemic, and you had all the traveling fans traveling as well. Who knows how much the virus was being spread during that, excuse me, during that period. But they proceeded, uh, and they just let that happen when probably would have been smarter for them to postpone that tournament again and put it in 2022, which because the World Cup was going to be played in excuse me, it was going to be played in November, so they had that window. They could have just put it there. Say, you know what? Since we're still in the midst of pandemic, we'll allow, and we'll push it back. We'll push back the Euros another year. But no, for financial interest, we all know they said no. We're going to play this tournament, and not just that, we're going to play it all over the continent. And they're the ones wanting to give us lectures about the well-being and the soul of the game. In terms of the private equity, I'll just say one thing is that I know there's been a lot of talks about their interest, that they might have more power in the game, that you might see things as if they might increase the amount of games and all that. Well, that's really what's happening already today. We already have an expanded World Cup, an expanded Euros. They changed the format of the Champions League to add more games, add more teams, all for interest. And the voting system is all to a certain degree, let's just say, benefited based on power, because when people vote, they don't the even though they're supposed to have these uh, the people who vote, even though they're supposed to have a fiduciary responsibility, we all know that they don't vote based on the well-being of the game. They vote based on the interests of their federation or their back pockets. Who knows? So if So how so when people dramatize about all the interest, the only good thing about if this were to have happened is that at least people coming in would at least be putting their money where their mouths is, because all these organizations are dealing with money that's not theirs. That's why we see the constant issues with FIFA and even UEFA. So that's a so that's a th- so that's it, and that's just one thing I wanted to make clear, because it's a turf war between two alpha dogs. That's what it really is. These organizations, as I said, I'm not saying that if I'm not saying that either party has their reasons. I'm not even saying that I'm more inclined. As I said, I'm more closer to UEFA than FIFA, because even despite all the issues, I think I like the way UEFA functions compared to FIFA, especially these past few years. Not just with Infantino, but we've seen with Blatter. But I just wanted to make that clear that when we talk about this, let's just make it clear that this is a classic. This is not a case of good versus evil. It's two alpha dogs marking their territory. That's what it really is. It would be nice if the media would do that and tell the full story, not just the stories that they're most interested in. So that's what it is. Now we'll see whether Gianni Infantino remains in their position or he resigns or gets ousted. We'll see what happens there.